change in perspectives on energy risk and how countries and enterprises will seek to manage that looking forward. The idea that countries and enterprises just go back to the status quo ante, I think, is not credible. Countries and enterprises have been thinking about how to reduce the extent to which they are exposed to this kind of situation in the future, in anticipation that we're in for a rocky period, and these kinds of disruptions are going to be part of the calculus going forward. And what that has meant is, of course, intensified moves towards electrification, where enterprises, supply chains, and countries can, and that's going to change the composition of demand as well over the course of the medium term. So this particular war will have long-lasting legacies because it will cause transformations, structural transformations. Short-term legacy, some demand destruction, some recovery in some months' time as supply begins to recover back to pre-war levels. But ultimately, the war has catalyzed, I think, a reassessment of energy structure and energy risk, and that will see ongoing efforts made around the world to reduce dependency on oil from the Middle East for future economic development and activity.
Yeah, there's some countries already made adjustment. For example, the country of Laos, the government have announced they have banned the importation of ICE vehicles. With some important exceptions. I mean, it makes sense because Laos is an oil poor country. They need to export over 90% of their refined petroleum products, mostly from Thailand, and they're on the other hand, they're abundant in hydropower electricity. And Laos being the country next door to China, they can very quickly ramp up import of EV cars to satisfy their transportation need, to be powered by clean hydropower produced domestically, rather than relying on imports. I think Laos probably not going to be. They're probably just going to be one of the first country to take such drastic measure. Ethiopia apparently did that back in 2024. I bet the government are patting themselves on the shoulder right now, to see how far sighted that move was. So I expect this similar measure to be adopted by other countries as well. Now we have countries like Nepal that achieved more than 60-70% sale of new vehicle in EVs. I mean, like this suggests, I think it's gonna this trend will only accelerate, especially with the Chinese quote unquote overcapacity to supply the world remain unabated. Speaking of China, China is surprisingly, held up surprisingly well during this crisis. Now, with 3.5 months into the closure of Hormuz, the oil inventory of China barely draw down. China still have 1.4 billion barrels of oil in the strategic oil reserve. And China had plenty of fertilizers because Chinese fertilizers are not made from natural gas like most of the world. They're made through coal to gasification process. And that means the Chinese farmers, which they just had their spring harvest, they had no problem accessing fertilizer. Many farmers around the world. So China will be well supplied, well stocked. Their strategy of energy diversification into sustainable energy as well as hydro, nuclear has really paid off.
Yeah,
But combined with their huge push for electrification, some say China is now it's going to be the world's first electro state, and so I expect that also to continue. But I did remember you mentioned something about China's coal to coal to oil industry that
Yeah.
would become viable provided if the price remains above certain level, like $75 per barrel or something like that. You think that that industry now will still be able to sustain itself?
Well, so long as the prices are high, comparatively speaking, it has a market, right? The interesting thing about the Chinese experience is, as you say, China has been incredibly well prepared for eventualities like this. And they've been well prepared not only because they've got large inventories of crude oil available, both in terms of known public reserves, but more than likely there are other reserves as well as commercial reserves. They've barely been touched. We also know that China has been able to cope incredibly well because, in fact, Chinese imports of crude from the global market has fallen substantially in the last 3 months, but the Chinese economy has not been as severely affected as you would otherwise believe with such a reduction in crude oil imports. In other words, the Chinese economy is not as dependent on oil imports as many people, I think, would initially, want to believe. I've mentioned this on many occasions now, but if this happened 25 years ago, I think the situation would be very different. But the idea of the Malacca dilemma, as Hu Jintao put it back in 2003, the concern that Chinese energy supplies from the Middle East would be curtailed by virtue of interdictions at the Strait of Malacca, led China ultimately to make incredible efforts to be prepared through diversification, through domestic capability development, as well as through the development of these reserves, and of course through the diversification of import sources as well. So a lot of Chinese effort over the course of this period of time has gone towards its diplomatic efforts across the Eurasian continent, into Russia and into Central Asia. So China's very, very well prepared. The second thing I think we can say about China is that, in fact, had it not been for China's preparedness and its ability to reduce its imports from the market, whilst at the same time maintaining a steady ship economically, the prices that we would have seen globally would have been much higher. So China's preparedness actually saved much of the industries of the world who would have really hit the wall had prices gone over $120, $130. The fact that they didn't, in large part, is due to China's ability to do what it did. That leads to a third important observation, and that, in fact, China is now paradoxically a global energy power because China's ability to modulate its demand for global oil means it is in a position to affect global oil prices, and we've seen that. And so anybody who, I think, works on the assumption that China is vulnerable to energy interdictions, in many ways haven't brought their assessments up to date with actually the structure of the global market, the distribution of natural resources, the chemical variations across different sources of oil, and ultimately also China's own restructuring and the nature of energy within China's own economic structure. China is, in addition to being able to affect global oil prices, China is obviously the spear carrier for electrification, not only of itself, but also enabling other countries to do so. You mentioned electric vehicles, but the next frontier is going to be trucks, and we're seeing significant growth already in electric trucks in China, and they will continue to expand globally as well. So we're going to move from a situation where people are being moved by electric vehicles to where goods are being moved by electric trucks. And we have also seen, I think this is still early days, the realization of electric and hybrid ocean container vessels. These aren't big ones. We're talking about container vessels that carry about 720 containers, which is very small compared to the 15,000 that ply the sort of major sea routes. But what this means is that a whole bunch of estuary-based and coastal-based shipping, as well as inter-island shipping in places like the Pacific will actually be something that can be undertaken with electrified marine transport as well. There's a bunch of very interesting developments in the air transport space. Obviously, long haul transport still relies on jet fuel, but short haul transport is increasingly moving towards electric powered drones and also hydrogen powered drones. So solid state batteries are starting to feature in drones, and I'm not talking about those little drones that we throw into the sky to take nice pictures, but serious drones that can carry hundreds of kilograms of payload. Whether it's for delivering or picking up agricultural products that are being harvested in remote parts of China, or we're talking about being able to move decent sized payloads in urban environments. We're going to see the electrification of air transport as well.
Yeah, speaking of which, I first heard of the term low altitude economy, coming out of China, and at first I was not sure how. I don't even knew what that mean. But pretty soon I saw the proliferation of the drones. I thought, okay, wow, China, they really saw a space opening up. In this case, they kind of foresaw this new frontier. And a lot of the Chinese companies are jumping on it, and this again is made possible by advancement in the battery technology, which the Chinese company also dominate. They are very quickly revolutionized. For example, as you mentioned, solid state batteries, and I also saw they're also putting into production now sodium ion battery, which would be much cheaper. This all allowed the storage of energy to be much cheaper. To on one hand, it made a lot of the green energy project more sustainable. For example, like solar, wind, when sometimes your energy source is not stable, often you need backup generators, backup by coal power plant to able to provide steady electricity. But now once you have a lot of cheap batteries, you can store a lot of these solar wind power generated during the peak hours and have them redistributed through the grid during the off hours. And you also make stuff like the long haul electric truck possible. Like it wasn't possible before, just because the battery technology was not there. Now I think we're going to see advancement in all these fronts very quickly. And one thing China is very good at doing is they take a new technology and commodify it. Make it so affordable that it can show up everywhere. And I'm fairly optimistic in that.